The fuel gauge is pinned on empty. Ahead, the deck of the carrier rises and falls like the chest of a sleeping giant, lifting and dropping with every swell of the Pacific. The ship is turning into the wind, white water curling off her bow, arrestor wires strung across her back like tripwires. And coming at her, too fast and barely in control, is a single battered fighter. From a distance it looks wrong, even to the seasoned eyes on deck. The silhouette is off. One wing looks shorter. Ragged at the tip, the whole airplane is cocked at a strange angle, as if it's fighting some invisible hand trying to roll it into the sea. Inside that cockpit, one man is holding his breath. His right hand is on the throttle, his left is on the stick, and wrapped around that stick, stretched to its limit, is a plain, scuffed bungee cord, his only autopilot on an aircraft that by all rights should have fallen out of the sky hundreds of miles ago. There is no fuel for a go-around. There may not even be enough fuel to reach the deck. And 300 miles behind him lies the piece of Pacific where everyone, including his own squadron, quietly agreed he had died. So how did he get here? How do you fly 300 miles with part of a wing missing? And why were his own comrades already talking about him in the past tense? This is the story of Bill Savile, the pilot they left for dead, who refused to cooperate. And to understand how a man ends up trusting his life to a bungee cord at 130 knots, we need to go back. Not to the deck you see now, but to the same ship one uneventful morning, when this was just another mission in a long, grinding war. Imagine the carrier before dawn. No sunlight yet, just the dull red glow of battle lanterns along the hangar deck. Men move in half-light. Mechanics with oil-stained hands, ordnance crews rolling carts of bombs and ammunition, pilots in flight jackets cupping mugs of coffee, pretending they're more awake than they are. The smell down here is permanent. Aviation fuel, hot oil, paint, sweat, and the faint chemical sting of hydraulic fluid. Somewhere above, the ship's engines thrum a steady bass note, a reminder that the whole steel island is alive and pushing through the Pacific. Bill Savile is just one of many faces in this floating city. He's not a movie star ace. Not yet, anyway. He's a naval aviator in his 20s, old enough to have lost friends, young enough to still believe in his luck. His hair's cropped short under his cloth helmet. His life jacket rides a little awkwardly on his shoulders, and there's that peculiar mix of nerves and boredom etched into his expression. The look of someone who's done this enough times to know it's dangerous, but not enough times to grow numb to it. Where he was born, what he liked to do before the war, which high school he skipped out of to go flying, those details get lost in the paperwork. What we do know is this. By the time he walked into that ready room, he'd flown a lot of hours off that deck, and every one of them could have been his last. The briefing is like hundreds before it. A big map pinned to a board, grease pencil lines showing their route. Targets, waypoints, altitudes. Off to one side, a weather chart with arrows and cryptic symbols. Winds aloft, cloud layers, the sort of things pilots pretend not to worry about because they can't do anything about them anyway. The officer at the front talks through it in a flat, practiced voice. It's another strike or maybe combat air patrol. The specifics aren't what matter. What matters is that it sounds routine. The same way things sound before they change your life. Some of the men are taking notes. Some are staring into the middle distance, already flying the mission in their heads. One or two are silently doing the math on their 9th, 10th, 11th combat hop. They all know the odds. You fly enough missions, the law of averages starts to look like a personal enemy. If you could pause that room, freeze it for a second, and walk among them, you'd have no way of knowing which one was about to pull off something that would be whispered about in wardrooms for years. That's the thing about days that change history. They look a lot like all the others when they start. On the flight deck, the world is waking up. The sun is dragging itself over the horizon, painting the ocean in metallic grays and silvers. Deck crew in colored jerseys move with purpose, hands up, signaling, shouting over the roar of engines. There's always that element of barely controlled chaos out here, propellers spinning, wings unfolding, chocks being kicked away. Somewhere in that organized storm, Bill's fighter is being prepped. To modern eyes, a WWII carrier fighter looks almost fragile. Fabric control surfaces, riveted aluminum, a single piston engine hauling everything into the air. But in the context of its time, it's a machine built for punishment. Heavy, tough, able to take hits that would shred a peacetime aircraft. Nobody that morning is thinking about how much punishment one of these planes can take. They're thinking about charts, headings, altitudes, that nagging cough their engine had last flight, the way the waves look a little higher than yesterday. Bill walks across the deck, ducking under wings, stepping around tie-downs, taking in the last few details before strapping himself to his airplane. He's done this enough times that his body moves on autopilot. Hand on the cowling, feel the warmth from the engine test. A quick glance at the tires. The telltale streaks of grease and exhaust stains along the fuselage. Is there anything out of place? Anything that feels wrong? Everything seems normal. He climbs up the wing, drops into the cockpit, buckles in. The straps bite into his shoulders as he hauls them tight. He checks the panel, gauges lined up in familiar rows, switches in their correct positions. The world shrinks to a frame of glass and steel around him. One by one, the fighters in his squadron cough, sputter, and then settle into a deep, steady roar. Propeller arcs shimmer in the first real light of day. The ship turns into the wind. Ahead of each pilot is only open ocean, and whatever the war has planned for them today. Have you ever had a day begin like every other, only to realize later that there was a line drawn across your life, before and after, and that line was somewhere in the moments you weren't really paying attention? That's what this morning is for Bill Savile. The launch is the usual jolt. Chocks out, a deckhand's thumbs up, and then he's taxiing into position. The world is all noise and vibration, deck markings rushing under the wheels, the prow of the ship dropping and lifting against the horizon. He locks his harness, gives one last look at his instruments, takes a breath. Throttle forward. Engine at full song, the entire aircraft rattling like it might shake itself to pieces. Then the catapult officer's signal, the sudden punch to the chest as the plane is hurled forward. For a few heartbeats, there is nothing under him but painted steel and white spray. Then lift. The carrier drops away, the ocean tilts, and he's airborne. Climbing through the spray-flecked air, he forms up with the others, the little cluster of fighters that will be his world for the next few hours. They settle into formation, tiny specks of metal against an endless sheet of water. Up here, away from the noise and crush of the ship, there's space to think. Pilots think about all kinds of things on these flights. Home, what's for dinner, that last letter they got, that last letter they haven't answered. Maybe Bill tries not to think about the men who didn't make it back last week. Maybe he's remembering the last time someone didn't come back at all. What would you be thinking, easing into formation, 300 miles of ocean ahead, not knowing that somewhere out there, the sky has a surprise waiting for you? The first part of the flight is uneventful. That's the word pilots use for the best kind of mission, uneventful. The engine runs smooth. The radio crackles with routine chatter. The ocean marches past in slow, hypnotic swells. They're flying in close formation, wings only a few feet apart. It looks elegant from the ground, planes in neat lines, moving like parts of one machine. From inside, it's hard work. Constant tiny corrections to keep position, to avoid sliding in too close or falling too far back. There's an unwritten trust here. Each pilot is responsible not just for himself, but for the safety bubble around his airplane. Everyone assumes everyone else will hold their spot, keep their spacing, react predictably, until someone doesn't. Even decades later, after the war, stories like this are told with a shrug and a phrase. We were flying formation and something went wrong. Maybe there was a patch of rough air. Maybe one pilot glanced at a gauge for half a second too long. Maybe the sun hit a canopy just right and someone lost sight of a wingtip. The exact moment is hard to pin down. What matters is this: two aircraft that should have kept a polite few feet of distance between them drift closer. Closer, too close. Bill doesn't see it coming until the last second. There is a flash of metal in his peripheral vision, a sudden bloom of noise as one shape crosses just above his right wing. Then the world explodes in sound and violence. The impact is not a gentle nudge. It's a hammer blow, metal against metal at a closing speed of dozens of knots. A shriek of tearing aluminum. A jolt so violent it slams his head against the cockpit frame. His fighter lurches. There is a weightless instant, a sickening, floating moment, before the laws of physics reassert themselves with a vengeance. 5 feet of his starboard wing are simply gone. Ripped away, leaving jagged spars and twisted skin flapping in the roaring slipstream. The effect is immediate and brutal. Without that section of wing, the lift on the right side of the aircraft collapses. The remaining wing on the left is still biting into the air, still trying to pull that side of the airplane up. The result is a savage rolling moment. The plane snaps to the right, desperate to tuck that damaged wing under and spin to enter the death spiral that has claimed countless pilots over countless wars. The horizon goes from level to vertical in an instant. Sky. Ocean. Sky again as the aircraft begins to roll completely over. Inside the cockpit, everything that was solid a heartbeat before is suddenly uncertain. His head slams to one side, his arms are thrown around by G-forces he didn't ask for. Training kicks in before conscious thought. Left aileron, left rudder, opposite stick, fight the roll. His muscles know what to do before his brain has time to articulate the problem. He hauls the stick over, stamping on the rudder pedals, trying to arrest the rotation. For a few seconds there is no narrative, no grand thoughts, just instinct and motion and the animal panic of a human being trying very hard not to die in the next 5 seconds. Have you ever been in a car that suddenly fishtailed on ice? That sideways, out of control lurch? Multiply that by 10, take away the road, and add 2,000 feet of empty air below you. His eyes flick to the altimeter. The needle is unwinding, the numbers dropping fast. They're losing height. Fast. Somehow, by strength, luck, or the stubborn persistence of a half-wrecked airframe, the roll slows. The plane shudders, protests, but levels enough that the horizon becomes a line again instead of a blur. It's not stable. It's not right. The damaged wing is still trying to drop. The good wing is still hauling the aircraft around. He has to hold constant pressure just to keep it roughly level. A normal fighter on a normal day wants to fly straight and true if you trim it properly and let go of the stick. This airplane wants to kill him the moment he relaxes. Around him, the sky is suddenly empty. The other fighter involved in the collision is nowhere he can see. The rest of the formation, realizing something violent just happened behind them, is spreading out, climbing, turning, trying to avoid a chain reaction accident. On someone else's radio, you can imagine the terse, shocked voices. "Christ, did you see that? Savile took a hit. Where is he? I don't see him. You got eyes on him." At some point, someone looks back at the tumbling shape, sees it drop, sees a spray of debris, loses it against the glint of the ocean below. Negative visual. He's gone. He's in. Just like that, in the brutal shorthand of combat flying, one of their own becomes a past tense. Back in his cockpit, Bill does not have time to care what they're saying. He's very busy trying to stay alive. He takes stock in rapid snapshots. Engine still running, that's something. Controls effective but heavy and offset. The whole airframe vibrating in a new, alarming way as air claws at torn metal and exposed structure on the wing. He peeks out to the right. Where a smooth wingtip used to be, there's now a jagged stump. The aileron on that side, what's left of it, is twisted, the hinge line distorted. Control on that side is a suggestion at best. He looks at the altimeter again. They're low. Much lower than a few seconds ago. He can still climb just if he pours on the power and accepts the aircraft's angry complaints. Climbing means more time. More time means more options. He pulls gently, carefully on the stick. The damaged aircraft responds reluctantly, wobbling, but the numbers on the altimeter creep upward. Now he can afford one terrifying thought. He is 300 miles from the carrier. 300 miles of open water between him and the only strip of steel big enough to land this machine on. No islands, no friendly airfield, just ocean. Ditching, putting the plane into the water on purpose, is technically an option. But look at that wing. Look at the way it's already trying to flip him over in the air. What will it do if he slams it into the surface of the Pacific at 70 or 80 knots? There's a very real chance the moment that wing touches water, it'll dig in and cartwheel the whole aircraft, snapping the fuselage, snapping his neck. Does he trust that outcome more than his odds of flying 300 miles in a crippled fighter? What would you choose? Take your chances with a broken airplane in the sky, or take your chances with that same broken airplane turning into a tumbling coffin in the sea? He glances at the fuel gauges. The needles are not exactly reassuring. They show enough fuel for a healthy aircraft flying efficiently at cruise power. But he's not in a healthy aircraft. He can't fly it efficiently. To stay controllable, he may need more speed, more power, more fuel. He does the rough math in his head. Pilots live with numbers like this. Gallons per hour, miles per gallon, reserve fuel. Even if the gauges are being optimistic, even if there's some margin, the conclusion is clear. He might be able to limp back if nothing else goes wrong. But there's one problem. His arms are already burning. To keep the aircraft roughly level, he's having to hold a constant, heavy left pressure on the stick and a steady foot on the rudder. That damaged wing is exerting a relentless twisting force, hour after hour. How long can you hold a heavy weight outstretched before your muscles give up? A minute? 2? Now imagine doing that for hours, in turbulence, in noise, with adrenaline humming through your veins. He thinks ahead, sees himself 70, 80, 100 miles from the carrier, hands trembling with fatigue, and the stark image comes to him. The moment his strength goes, the stick comes back to center. Even for a second, the aircraft rolls, and that's it. He can't outmuscle physics for 300 miles. If he wants to survive, he needs to outthink them. Down in the cockpit, amid the dials and levers, there are a few personal odds and ends, charts folded and tucked away. A flashlight. Maybe a small toolkit, and something else, something common in these fighters, used for tying down gear or securing maps. A bungee cord. It's the simplest kind of tool, just a length of elastic with hooks on the end. The kind of thing you used to strap a bag to a bicycle today. In a sane world, it has no business being part of an airplane's flight control system. But the world 300 miles from the nearest carrier isn't sane. It's whatever you can make it. Somewhere between a grimace and a grin, the idea forms. If he can't keep up this constant pressure by himself, maybe he doesn't have to. He wrestles the stick into the position where the aircraft is roughly level, nose at a survivable attitude, wings as close to even as it will tolerate. Then, without letting go entirely, he works one hand down to feel for the bungee. The cockpit is not spacious. There's not a lot of room to squirm. Every movement is a negotiation with the harness, with the confines of the canopy. But he gets hold of it, hooks one end around the base of the stick, feels it bite the metal. Now he needs something to anchor the other end to, somewhere to pull the stick left, to oppose the damaged wing's urge to roll right. There are frame members, handles, bits of structure designed to take loads much greater than a bungee cord can exert. He tests quickly in his mind. If he runs the cord from here around the stick to there, will it pull the stick where he needs it? Will it help? Only one way to find out. He threads it, fighting both the airplane and the clock. For a few heart-stopping seconds, he has to loosen his grip just a little to loop the elastic around. The aircraft immediately seizes the opportunity, rolling, trying to twist. He curses, hauls it back again, beads of sweat starting to form despite the cool air. Finally, the cord is in place. One end on the stick, the other secured to a solid point on his left. He eases his hand away just a little, feeling the new force take up. The bungee stretches, pulling the stick left, fighting the twisted aerodynamics of the mangled wing. The airplane rocks, shudders, but it does not immediately roll over and die. It holds something approximating level. It's crude. It's ugly. It's not something you'd ever teach a pilot to do in a classroom. But this isn't a classroom. This is 300 miles of open water. Would you trust your life to a piece of elastic and a good guess? Bill does because he has to. With the bungee taking some of the load, he can release his death grip by a fraction. Enough to shake out his fingers, flex his stiff hand, roll his aching shoulders. The cord is not doing all the work, not by a long shot. He still has to nurse the stick, feel every wobble, correct every tendency for the plane to wander. But the constant grinding pressure is now shared. It's become a kind of crude, improvised autopilot. He stabilizes the aircraft as best he can, sets a heading back toward where he knows the carrier should be, checks his compass against his mental map. Behind him, the rest of the formation is long gone. On the radios, the others are reforming, refocusing on their mission. There's a grim rule in war. You can't always go back for the man who falls out of formation. If you turned every mission into a search and rescue, you'd lose the war. Someone will report in clipped tones that one aircraft was lost in a mid-air incident. In the ready room, hours from now, that will be written on the board: one aircraft missing, one pilot missing, KIA presumed, unless proven otherwise. Up here, Bill is working on the otherwise. The ocean below him is a sheet of gray. It could be 10 miles wide or 10,000. There are no landmarks, no roads, no towns. Just water and sky and an airplane that wants to go anywhere but straight. To keep your bearings in this emptiness, you rely on instruments, on your internal compass, on the little details that tell you the wind. From here, the sun's there, your ship should be somewhere along this line. In a normal aircraft, you can take a hand off the stick for a moment, check a map, adjust the radio. Let your attention flow from one task to another. In this one, every glance away from the horizon is a calculated risk. He sneaks looks at his fuel gauges, at the compass, at any hint that his engine might be running rougher than before. Each time he looks back up, he has to fight a tiny drift that's developed, a subtle sag of that mangled wing. Minute by minute, mile by mile, he creeps toward where the carrier should be. We tend to imagine stories like this as a continuous stream of high drama, but the reality is stranger. Between spikes of panic and brief, frantic corrections, there are long stretches of nothing much, just the engine's steady roar, the vibration through the seat, the relentless sameness of the ocean, and inside his head the slow, grinding weight of fatigue, Have you ever had to hold onto something, literally or figuratively, for far longer than you thought you could? There's a point where your muscles ache, your mind tells you to quit, and then another, deeper place where something else takes over, stubbornness, maybe. Pride. Sheer refusal to let go. That's where he lives for the next few hours. Down on the carrier, life goes on. The air group launches, attacks, returns. Deck crews recover aircraft, refuel them, rearm them. The ship turns and turns again, adjusting course and speed according to orders from higher up the chain. Somewhere in the admin spaces, a clerk has already noted a missing aircraft. There will be a small, informal conversation among the pilots when they're back on board. Anyone see him bail out? Negative. Any oil slick debris? Too busy dodging pieces, I guess. The faces are tight, the answer's short. You don't linger on it, you can't. There's another mission sitting on the board for tomorrow, and maybe the day after that. In wartime, grief is often delayed, rationed out in small doses between tasks. But out on the horizon, unknown to everyone on that ship, one of their own is still out there, creeping toward them on an invisible thread of luck and fuel. Time stretches. The sun climbs higher. Shadows in the cockpit shift. The engine's tone changes slightly with each adjustment of throttle and propeller. He's constantly aware of one thing, the fuel needles. They tick downward with maddening inevitability. Not fast, not slow, just steady. In a healthy fighter, a pilot might plan to arrive at the carrier with a comfortable reserve. Enough for a go-around if things look wrong. Enough to divert to an alternate if the deck is fouled. Bill knows he will not have that luxury. Every minute he spends up here is another sip taken from a cup that he cannot refill. There's a quiet, ugly thought that creeps in at the edges. What if he gets all the way there, endures hours of strain, survives the damage, finds the ship, and then runs out of fuel on final approach? Is that better or worse than going into the ocean 70 miles out? It's the kind of question you push away as soon as it forms, because it doesn't help you keep the wings level right now. If you were sitting in that cockpit watching those needles sink toward zero, what would be going through your mind? Some pilots in stressful moments talk to their aircraft, whisper encouragement or insults, bargain with them like stubborn horses. Some retreat into a tight, efficient mental tunnel. Checklist, wings, check, heading, check, fuel low but not empty, repeat. Again, from the outside you can imagine Bill cycling through these states, cursing the bungee when it slips an inch, thanking it when it holds. Making constant tiny adjustments, his hands beginning to move almost of their own accord. He is alone in a way few humans ever experience, utterly alone, hanging between sea and sky with only his own judgment between him and oblivion. And yet there is a kind of companionship, the aircraft itself. Every sound, every vibration is a kind of conversation. Is the engine knocking? Is that flutter in the controls new, or has it been there the whole time? Was that jolt turbulence, or did a new piece of damaged metal finally tear free? He knows this airplane intimately. He's flown it, or one's just like it, in dozens of situations. He knows what it should feel like when it's healthy. Now he's learning what it feels like when it's wounded but not dead. At some point in this long, grinding flight, a dark shape appears on the horizon. At first, it's just a darker smudge against the seam where sky meets water. A trick of the light, maybe. A cloud shadow. But as miles slide beneath him, the shape resolves into something with structure. A flat top. A wake trailing behind it like a white scar. The carrier. Home, relief hits like a physical force. His chest loosens. His shoulders, locked in the same tense hunch for ages, sag a fraction. But the relief is tangled with a new terror. Because reaching the carrier is not the end of his problems. It's the beginning of a whole new set. Landing a healthy, fully functional fighter on a moving carrier in good weather is already one of the most demanding, unforgiving tasks in aviation. You're aiming at a deck that's a few hundred feet long and not much wider, moving at 20 or 30 knots, rising and falling with the waves. You have to arrive at just the right speed, fast enough to stay flying, slow enough that the arrestor hook can grab a wire and haul you down. Too fast and you might skip over the wires entirely, crash into the barriers, or plow into parked aircraft. Too slow and you stall, dropping the last few feet like a stone, smashing landing gear, snapping wings, maybe going over the side. Pilots practice this over and over in training, building the muscle memory, the eye for what good looks like on approach. But Bill's situation is different. That missing piece of wing changes everything. It reduces the overall lift on that side, increases the stall speed, warps the way the airflow wraps around the fuselage. To keep enough lift, he has to fly faster, faster than normal approach speed, which means when he comes over the stern of the ship, his airplane will be carrying more energy, hitting the deck harder. It will be less forgiving of any last-second wobble. It will have more incentive to leap back into the air if he doesn't snag a wire. He knows this. The landing signal officer, LSO, the man on the deck with the paddles or light signals, will know it too once he catches sight of the damage. Imagine being that LSO. You're standing on a small platform at the side of the landing area, eyes glued to the sky astern. You see one fighter after another appear on the glide path, lined up on speed, wheels, and hooks down. You give them corrections with your paddles. A little power. You're low. Wave off when it looks bad. Then you see this. A fighter coming in with a visibly mangled right wing. The tip just gone. The whole aircraft canted at a slight angle to hold level. The nose may be a little higher than you'd like, the speed clearly higher than usual. Do you wave him off? Wave him off to what? There's nowhere else for him to go. No spare runway waiting in the wings. No extra fuel to go around for another try. Up in the circuit, as he begins his approach, Bill is all too aware of just how little slack is left in this system. He will get, effectively, one pass. He calls the ship on the radio, giving his call sign his situation. There's a moment of stunned silence, then a flurry of controlled activity. Say again, you're missing what? Starboard wing, last 5 feet gone, still controllable, low on fuel, request immediate landing. On the carrier's bridge and air operations center, officers lean over plotting boards, glance through binoculars, trying to find the shape in the sky that matches that voice. When they do, it must be a surreal sight. From some angles, the aircraft looks normal. From others, the damage is obvious. A wing that ends too soon, jagged and wrong. They clear the deck. Any aircraft scheduled to land behind him is put in a holding pattern or diverted. Parked planes are moved as far forward as practical. Fire and crash crews are dragged closer, hoses and foam ready. On some faces, there's skepticism. Surely he can't actually bring that thing aboard. But beneath that doubt is a shared professional respect. If he's made it this far, he's already done something extraordinary. As he turns into the downwind leg of his approach pattern, parallel to the ship, preparing to turn back in toward the stern, he must feel every flaw in the damaged aerodynamics. Turning left feels different from turning right. Banking toward the missing wing is probably twitchy, the controls light one moment and heavy the next. He keeps the bungee in place as long as he can, letting it help him hold the offset needed to stay level. But at some point on final approach, he knows he may have to fight without it. On short final, that last, critical segment just before the wheels touch the deck, he has to be able to make rapid, precise corrections. The bungee, for all its help, also resists movement. It might be just enough to slow him down that fatal fraction of a second. He'll have to pick his moment. Out behind the carrier, he lines up. The deck is now a rectangular patch of dark gray, its edges marked by lines of white-clad sailors. The wake streaming off the stern makes a kind of arrow, pointing toward him. The LSO's signals flicker. On glide path, a little high. Power. He's fast. Faster than anyone would choose to be. The airspeed needle is creeping near 130 knots, well above the usual carrier approach speed for his type. He has no choice. Anything less, and that truncated wing may stop generating enough lift, dropping that side and sending him into an uncontrolled roll only a few dozen feet above the water. There are moments in a pilot's life when time slows down. As he comes over the ramp, the edge of the deck at the stern, those seconds stretch. The bungee is still there, pulling, helping, but also resisting. He feels the aircraft start a tiny, deadly wobble. The damaged wing twitches. The nose wants to yaw. This is it. He reaches down, unhooks or relaxes the bungee, freeing the stick for those last, tiny corrections. Now it's just him, the plane, and gravity. His left hand eases the throttle. His right hand dances on the stick, trying to keep that broken machine in a tight imaginary corridor. Not too high, not too low, not too far left or right. Deck crew watching from the sidelines can see the jagged wing tip. They can see, too, the way the entire airframe seems to be fighting itself, rocking minutely even as it hurtles toward them. The wheels hit. Hard. There's no graceful greaser here, no smooth kissing of rubber to steel. The aircraft slams onto the deck, the shock struts compressing, the tail dropping. The arrestor hook scrapes, then catches, biting one of the wires stretched across the landing area. For an instant, the airplane tries to surge forward, its momentum outraged at being checked. The wire stretches, sings, then hauls the weight of plane and pilot from 130 knots to 0 in the space of a few dozen yards. Everything in the cockpit surges forward. Belts cut into his shoulders. His head snaps against the harness. Tools and loose objects clatter against the panel, and then stillness. The engine, already running on fumes, coughs once, twice. then dies. Silence rushes in, thick and heavy, broken only by the distant roar of the sea and the shouted commands of deck crews rushing toward him. He looks up. Through the smeared canopy he can see the faces of men he knows, eyes wide, mouths forming words that don't carry through the glass. On the wings, crash crews are already moving, foam hoses snaking closer, ready to smother any fire that dares appear. He reaches for the canopy latch, hands trembling now that the need for absolute control has passed. The glass slides back, letting in the cold, oily air of the deck. Voices hit him all at once. "Jesus, look at that wing! We thought you bought it out there. You crazy bastard, how did you?" Somewhere in that chaotic chorus is an undercurrent of something deeper than shock, respect, awe even. He unbuckles, slowly, every movement deliberate. His legs feel rubbery as he swings them over the side and drops onto the deck. For the first time, he sees his airplane from the outside. Where the right wingtip should be, there is nothing but twisted metal, jagged spars, and a tangle of torn skin. It looks worse from here than it did from the cockpit. Standing there, helmet still on, life jacket creaking, he might feel a strange disconnect. This wreck, this wounded creature, this is what carried him home. How do you thank a machine? Around him, sailors and fellow pilots move in closer, some reaching out to touch the torn wing as if to prove it's real. There's nervous laughter, the kind that comes after something terrible passes close and then moves on. Someone claps him on the shoulder hard enough to stagger him. "You were supposed to be dead," they say, half joking, half not. On some level, the ship had already written his story. A line in a logbook, a note to be sent to a family somewhere far away, a quiet toast in the wardroom that night. But Bill Savile declined to play his assigned role. He flew 300 miles over open ocean with a piece of his airplane missing, fought constant torque with his bare hands, and when his strength wasn't enough, he found partnership in a length of bungee cord. When he did finally touch down, there wasn't a drop of fuel left in his tanks. Zero margin, all or nothing. In the days and weeks that follow, the war rolls on. There are more missions, more briefings, more names written on and wiped off the ready room board. The story of the one-wing flight becomes part of the ship's lore, retold in fragments over coffee, over cards, on the catwalk at midnight. Some details change in the retelling. The distance grows or shrinks. The exact nature of the damage becomes more dramatic or more precise. That's how oral history works. But the core remains. A pilot lost part of his wing in a mid-air collision. He was 300 miles from his carrier. He improvised a crude autopilot with a bungee cord to fight the asymmetric lift. He flew home anyway. And he slammed that wreck onto a pitching deck at 130 knots with dry tanks and nothing left to spare. In a war full of loud heroics, dogfights and daring raids, medals pinned on under cameras, it's easy for quieter feats like this to sink below the surface of public memory. Yet there's something deeply compelling about this kind of story. It's not about shooting down the enemy. It's not about orders or strategy. It's about a single human being alone in a hostile environment, confronted with a problem that no manual has a chapter for, and solving it anyway. How do you train for that? How do you prepare for the moment when the universe decides to toss you something you've never seen before? You can't, not completely. You build skill, knowledge, reflexes. But beyond that, you hope that when the time comes, you'll be able to improvise. That you'll have the creativity to look at what's around you, bungee cords, bits of structure, your own body, and assemble out of that chaos some kind of path forward. It's easy from the comfort of an armchair decades later to say, "Oh, I'd have done the same thing." Would you? Would you have noticed that bungee cord? Would you have trusted it enough to loosen your death grip on the controls? Would you have had the patience to nurse that crippled airplane over hundreds of miles of empty sea, with your muscles screaming and your brain whispering that a clean, instant end in the water might be easier than this slow, grinding fight? Or would you have surrendered to the first roll, the first hint of doom? Stories like Bill Savile's don't just tell us about the past. They hold up a mirror. They ask us, when, not if, life tears a piece off your wing, what will you do? Will you curse the unfairness and let gravity take you? Or will you look around your cockpit, your life, for your own bungee cord? The thing no one told you to use, the hack, the workaround, the desperate, clever idea that might just give you a fighting chance. Because in the end, that's what this tale is. Not just a war story, a survival story. A story of improvisation under pressure, of stubbornness in the face of long odds, of refusing to accept the role of missing, presumed, when the world has already penciled your name into that column. Bill Savile's one-wing flight sits alongside other legendary returns, bombers limping home on 3 engines and a prayer, fighters with holes you could step through somehow finding their way back to base. Together, they tell us something about the machines of that era. Tough, forgiving, sometimes miraculously so. But more than that, they tell us about the people inside them. They were not superhuman. They were not fearless automatons. They were men who felt fear, who made mistakes, who missed home and worried about their next letter just like anyone else. The difference on days like that gray Pacific morning is that when the sky threw them a problem no one had prepared them for, they met it with something very simple and very rare. They did not give up. If this story reached you, if you found yourself in that cockpit watching the horizon tilt, feeling the strain in your arms as you fought that broken wing, then there are countless more like it, tucked away in the history of that war and every war since. Different names, different machines. The same essential question: when the wing tears off, what kind of pilot are you going to be? Thank you for watching, and for spending this time with a man who, for a few very long hours over the Pacific, proved just how far a human being can go on one good wing and a length of bungee cord.